Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first in Owen Mitchell's series of webinars focusing on mental health in our communities. My name's Steph Clark, and I'm a solicitor at Owen Mitchell in our Southampton office, and I specialise in personal injury. I'm delighted to welcome you all to this webinar on supporting children and young people with mental health. This event is part of a nine-part series of webinars on a range of topics that are being held in anticipation for World Mental Health Day this Saturday, the 10th of October, which is the International Day for Global Mental Health Education, Awareness, and also and advocacy against social stigma of mental health. We are recording these events, and we're also creating a document with some of the practical tips, which we'll go on to discuss a bit later, and that will be sent around after all of the webinars. So, as we all know, 2020 has been a year like no other. World Mental Health Day has come at a time when many lives have been turned upside down. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown that many areas of society are under increasing pressure and are struggling to get the right support. Many students have had to adapt to taking classes at home. Many have experienced little contact with their friends or teachers, and some young people have had to have parents which have experienced redundancies, key workers that have had to self-isolate away from their children, and parents with mental health conditions of their own. Some may have even had to experience the loss of a loved one. Even for young people with pre-existing mental health conditions, they will have experienced no greater social isolation. But we can't be ignorant to the fact that there has been a mental health crisis in young people long before COVID-19. Whether this has been young individuals suffering from mental health conditions themselves, or they have been caring for a family member, this is often an area of mental health that is described as chronically underfunded and at its knees. This morning, I'm delighted to welcome 4 special guests who all work with young people in some shape or form. And together we'll be discussing some of the causes surrounding mental health illness and the treatment crisis, and ways in which we as parents, families, schools and caregivers can support them as we navigate the ups and downs in this current time and beyond. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to firstly Sam Hunt. Sam, if you want to just give a quick introduction about yourself.
Good morning, everybody. Hi, I'm Sam Hunt, and I work for an organisation called Friends of the Family. We are a charity based in Winchester in Hampshire, and we have been running for 27 years now. In fact, it was our birthday yesterday. So it's a long-standing charity that supports local children and their families through a variety of different projects. The programme that I specifically run is called our 5s to 13s programme, and that's a befriending programme for children within that age range. And we do that by supporting children who are referred to us who are struggling with family life, maybe, as Steph has sort of said before, the difficulties that young people have been facing. And we offer them a befriender, someone who will go and spend some time with them for a couple of hours each week, taking them out, doing some fun things, giving them some respite. And we find that that's a really therapeutic way of supporting young people. Is that enough?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks. And I know I think we are having some technical difficulties with one of our speakers. That's Dick Moore, that you can probably see on the screen there. So hopefully he'll be able to join us at some point. But moving on, if we can just, Gavin, if we can go over to you, if you can just introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Gavin Bailey. I'm the CEO for a company called Qualitas Sport. We currently operate around Derbyshire and South Yorkshire, and we deliver PE and sport provisions for primary schools around that area. That could be anything from supporting schools with CPD, work, supporting schools with after-school clubs, lunchtime clubs, delivering primary school events for children as well, from obviously all ages. And the main aim of the business really is to give children an opportunity to thrive, not survive at this at this current moment in time. And as we come out of this situation at this current time, it's about putting smiles on children's faces, because the last 6 months has definitely been a challenge for all.
That's brilliant. Okay, and if we can just go on to we've got Dr. Rebecca Trickich. Rebecca, if you just want to give an introduction.
Hi, morning everyone. So yeah, my name's Dr. Rebecca Trickich. I'm a qualified psychologist. So I've been qualified for 10 years, but I've been working with young people for 15 years. So I kind of started off my career doing nursery work and working with really little ones to kind of working up until kind of age 18. So I've worked in community services. So you might all be familiar with CAMS. So community services that work with young people with mental health difficulties. And currently I work in an inpatient hospital for young people suffering from anorexia. And you've probably seen in the media recently that figures for eating disorders have really increased linked to COVID. So I work with young people with anorexia. I also do assessment for autism, work with young people with autism. And my specialist areas are kind of anorexia and autism, but also working a lot with depression and anxiety. And I also do some work for Gavin with Qualitas, thinking about how he can give the message to schools about promoting healthy emotional well-being, and also do some individual work with players in terms of getting young people to think about physical health and mental health, and thinking about promoting their football performance and overall sport performance by having positive mental health.
That's brilliant. I don't think we've managed to get Dick on just yet. I'll just give a quick overview of where Dick's from, but basically he's a speaker with the Charlie Waller Memorial Trust. And he's, amongst other things, he's a father, and he advocates on raising awareness of mental health and emotional well-being in young people. And I know he's spoken at sort of hundreds of schools and universities. So hopefully he can join us at some stage to just give us some perspective on what he's experienced. So I should also just say to all of our attendees that there is a Q&A box that should be on your screen. So you're more than welcome throughout the whole webinar to drop any questions for us, and we'll try and incorporate them as we go along rather than leave them till the end. And if you can also just leave your email address, or if you're happy to leave your email address, because then if we've run over and we don't get a chance to answer the question, we can drop you an email. But as I've said, the webinar will also be recorded. So I thought it might just be helpful for our attendees today, just maybe some of them might not be as aware of some of the causes that cause mental health issues in young people. Rebecca, I thought we might turn to you actually in terms of what some of the causes that you've noticed, especially at the moment, in mental health conditions in young people. So if I could just turn to you first to maybe give a brief overview and what you've experienced.
Yeah, I guess, it's quite a complex question, and mental health is complicated, and it's never as straightforward as one thing happens and that causes a mental health difficulty. I guess what we kind of know is that there's certain things that make people vulnerable to mental health difficulties. So we know kind of genetic factors. If there's someone in your family that suffered from mental health difficulties, that can make a young person vulnerable. So there might be vulnerability factors there. And then, what life is like at the moment in terms of COVID has turned young people's life upside down. The things that they kind of had as kind of coping strategies, their predictability around school and hobbies and relationships have all changed. So that can definitely make people more vulnerable. Obviously, kind of more, perhaps young people are watching the news than they watched before, which could kind of trigger anxiety. But the main things about kind of just change to their life. I guess most of us like predictability, most of us like routine, and all of that has been changed. I think people are spending more time with family, which I guess in some scenarios is a great thing. But for those that are living with parents with mental health difficulties, with domestic violence, where there's social care issues, maybe they're young carers, their life has completely changed. Whilst before they had the escape from school, they're now living with those families all the time. And I think obviously social media, I think young people have always had, you know, perhaps a heavy relationship with social media, but it's perhaps become stronger over the last few months. And, you know, I'm definitely not criticising social media. It can provide connection for young people, and we definitely don't want our young people to feel lonely, but it just has to be really used with caution in terms of the pressures that they can put on young people. I know definitely the young people I work with anorexia, they often do talk to me about the negative impact of social media, and I think it's just naming that. I guess as a psychologist, I know a lot about kind of adolescent development, and for young people and adolescents, it's normal for them to question who they are and who they want to be. So, you know, some anxiety about that is there anyway. So I guess what this pandemic has introduced is even more uncertainty about life and who I am and who I want to be. So it's not surprising that kind of statistics and figures around young people and anxiety and low mood have really increased right now.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you raise, and especially about what you were saying about your children and young people that are at home more often than, you know, they haven't had their school to turn to as such. Sam, have you, just in terms of the work that you've been doing, have you experienced those kind of issues in terms of children being at home, maybe in a difficult scenario, and what kind of support, you know, is the charity that you come from? What kind of support are they having to cope with and try and offer now in light of the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with everything. You probably saw me nodding. I was agreeing with everything that Rebecca was saying. We do see everything that you've been discussing. Through the pandemic, it's been incredibly difficult for us to deliver our services to our families. As I said, we offer, particularly the programme I run is a befriending service, but once face-to-face contact with everybody stopped, it was very difficult for us to maintain that. But as Rebecca said, it was very important to keep those connections, keep those relationships alive. So lots of our volunteers who would have ordinarily gone and seen the children face to face went to online support, you know, were Zooming, Skyping, even some volunteers who perhaps weren't as keen to do those virtual connections were still maintaining a connection of a kind by sending the children little letters or postcards or emails. And it just helped to keep that relationship going during that time. Since the restrictions have been lifted a little bit, we have returned to face-to-face, obviously socially distanced, and we found that that's been so much more beneficial, actually the children needing opportunities to get out, to spend time with other people. And we did find as well that some of our families initially actually relished the lockdown. It was great because we didn't have to go anywhere, we don't have to be anywhere, we don't have to be restricted to you know, taking the children to school, etc. So for some families it was actually a really positive thing to start with. But, you know, after sort of 3 or 4 weeks, you could see the cracks appearing, and my contact with the parents particularly, we were sort of able to sort of try and draw on some of our own experiences and sort of support each other. You know, we found that sort of after sort of 6 weeks or so, people were beginning to get the end of the school holidays feeling of, oh my goodness, when are they going to go back to school? And as Rebecca says, you know, the consistency of having some structure in their day is so incredibly important. So our organisation, you know, we hope to be able to return to the work that we have been doing, supporting families in lots of different ways. But, you know, we're having to think a little bit more outside the box and offer slightly different approaches. But, you know, it's the new normal.
Absolutely. We've just had a question actually that kind of fits in around this, and there has been quite a few questions about social media. So I've got a question here. I'm not sure, maybe, I don't know if Gavin wants to answer this, but essentially they've asked that peer pressure is still prevalent in young people into their 20s. During the pandemic, a lot of people are turning to social media. how would you tackle someone becoming reliant on social media and it having a negative effect on their self-esteem and confidence throughout the pandemic? So I'm not sure if anyone is desperate to ask that question. Gavin, is that something you might be able to shed some light on? If obviously you've worked with some of the like young men as well, and maybe you could draw your sort of insight into what you've sort of experienced in that sort of world.
Yeah, I think social media has always been a challenge, even before COVID came along, and obviously since COVID has been here, looking at social media every day, analysing the content. When you switch the news on, when you get in, you get home at night. Everything it's literally everything's about doom and gloom. It's all about the negative factors, what we're having to deal with at this moment in time, and there's no release from it. There's no release from it, and some people can deal with it and adjust and adapt to change, but some people can sadly not. And for us, especially Qualitas in our community now, it's about engaging with children, with local families, to actually help them, with these difficult challenges they have. Obviously, we're a sport coaching company, and we deliver PE curriculums to every school, and we interact with schools, and we help schools find solutions to the barriers. What I will say, the biggest challenge for us at the moment, or has been, what we have been doing in the past, trying to tackle some of this, has not been allowed, since COVID happened, because we can't actually go into the schools to make those changes and help those children with difficult challenges they have at this time. So it's a difficult one. It's a real conundrum at the moment, I think.
Yeah. Do you think some sort of areas of society are being a bit more impacted than others, would you say, in terms of even like location, or dependent on the local authority? Obviously, I know you're based up in Sheffield, but I think you cover quite a wide range in terms of geographical location. Have you seen any?
I think again, this just adds to the confusion, really, because Sheffield have got a different stance on how they tackle COVID compared to Chesterfield, and we work in around about 60 primary schools around Chesterfield and the Sheffield area, and they've all got their own different rules and regulations, and because they're so close together, the areas, it's very difficult to make an informed decision about what's right or what's wrong, and until we get some continuity, and until people start talking about the challenges we have at this time, and then start looking at finding solutions instead of just presenting everyone with barriers, then we're just going to be standing still, unfortunately.
Thank you. There was actually a survey done recently. It was done by Young Minds, the charity and that also promote mental health awareness. Between the 6th of June and the 5th of July 2020, I think 2,036 young people took part in a survey, and I think the results revealed something like 80% of respondents. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just checking I wasn't on mute. Sorry, I suddenly had a panic. I'm so sorry. The results revealed that 80% of the respondents agreed that the coronavirus pandemic had made their mental health worse, with 41% saying that it was much worse. and 31% said that they were no longer able to access the resources that they needed to discuss their problems, their lack, the loss of motivation and coping mechanisms. Rebecca, I was just wondering if we could turn to you. What before coronavirus, what would be the normal route for a young person suffering from symptoms of mental health conditions to go through? Just in your experience, what you've sort of witnessed.
Yeah, I guess this kind of taps into previous point about kind of areas really, because I think it will vary across the country. So I guess the first stage is that young person kind of acknowledging and recognizing that they're struggling. And I think for young people, and particularly, I guess, why this webinar's been put on, there's still so much kind of stigma around mental health. So I guess the first, brave job for that young person is to acknowledge that they're struggling. And then they may speak to parents, or they may speak to school. Now, schools will really vary. Some will have like school counsellors or like a pastoral team where they can offer that emotional support. So definitely direct them, the young person to, or just a teacher that they feel that they can trust, that they can talk to. And I guess if school felt that they were really concerned about that young person, they might make a referral to CAMS. So that's Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services. And again, young people can see their GP or speak to parents, and parents can go to GP to get a referral to Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services. So, the community service there is designed to support young people with mental health difficulties. Now, of course, as you can imagine, like all services, they're very, very stretched. So, young people are unfortunately on waiting lists for sometimes a long time to get that support. So I think in the meantime, it is about kind of using voluntary kind of and charities around the young person to support them until they get sadly to the top of waiting lists. And there are, brilliant charities, voluntary organisations out there, lots of online support now. I guess one thing I would say is that services are stretched, and you have to fight. If you're concerned about a young person, if you're concerned about your son or daughter, you have to be on the phone constantly asking where they are on the waiting list. If there's any change in presentation, pick up the phone, particularly kind of around self-harm, suicidal ideation. If you're really concerned about that young person, it's about persistence, which you shouldn't have to do, but sadly, you do have to persist to kind of get that young person seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say that is because the system is underfunded, or is it a lack of sort of research in the area?
Mainly linked to resources, that there's just so many young people struggling, and just not enough staff to support kind of the needs really. And I think as you this isn't just COVID, this has happened way before COVID. But the COVID situation has obviously just escalated things, and it's going to take a long time to pick up things. I guess what we can try and do is thinking about, I guess more group work to try and kind of get people. It's maybe not as good as individual work. Obviously, we've got a long lists of people that are struggling. So it's about how we can kind of support everyone. So kind of group work might be a way just to kind of support more people.
Sam, I was wondering if you could just shed some insight in terms of what you, as a charity, Friends of the Family, have experienced, since COVID and even before, in terms of the capacity structure and all the referrals that come through to you. Have you experienced, is it, in terms of the frontline work that you've seen, is it as bad as, as everyone is saying?
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing this job now for about 12 years, and I've seen quite a considerable change in the resources that are available to families and children, particularly in the mental health sector. And when we started this programme, the referrals we were getting from schools, GPs, CAMS, etc., were less complex than they are now. And I think that's because services were available to pick up those children and support them in that time. And as the years have gone past, we have seen a decline in the availability of those services, and it is you know, they are very, very overstretched. So therefore the referrals that we're getting now are much more complex, and therefore when we're looking for our volunteers, you know, they are volunteers at the end of the day. They are not paid members of staff, they're not trained. They have an initial training programme, but of course they're not trained counsellors, they're not trained support workers, and they can only offer a limited amount of support. But what we do find is that the relationship that they build with the children and the families is incredibly important and very helpful and very supportive at a time when perhaps they are waiting for another service to come on board and you know, offer them something different. So we try our hardest, and we have a very high calibre of volunteers who engage with us, and you know, that the support that we offer them, we feel helps to enable them to support the child. But it is a difficult time, and funding for a voluntary organisation like ourselves is crucial. You know, we have to do a lot of fundraising ourselves. We do get some grants from other charitable organisations, but you know, again, the pot is shrinking, and it becomes quite difficult for us to tap into. You know, lots of people are looking for the same funding to be able to continue with their support services. And I think at this time, you know, when people are really struggling because of COVID, but as Rebecca said, it's been coming for a long time. It's not something new that suddenly we have mental health issues for young people. But the resources are quite limited, so we do feel that our time is now, but it's about maintaining that and being able to continue with our work under the restrictions and the limited resources that we have as an organisation.
Absolutely. We've had a question actually come in. There's quite a few interesting ones sort of on this topic in terms of the delay. Someone's asked, what can local areas do to increase the response time to the mental health crisis? This person has a young woman who is self-harming and has been suicidal and has been told that there could be a 6-week wait for help. Now, I know, Rebecca, you touched on sort of having to be very proactive about it. Is there anything else that can kind of be done to help this person potentially?
Yeah, as I say, you know, being proactive and, you know, looking at the voluntary and charity organisations around them, whether, you know, they're in school, whether there's any school counselling they can access while they're waiting. I guess at that point it's managing the crisis in terms of trying to give them as many coping strategies as they can to manage the suicidal feelings. So thinking about like self-soothe boxes, putting a box together with everything they can do to try and soothe them when they're feeling kind of particularly low and vulnerable, kind of like using mindfulness techniques. Like obviously they've got to wait for the professional support, so it's about anything they can do to kind of just manage in that time. And I think, you know, using if they've got like family, friends, just to kind of give them hope that, you know, I think that's the thing, when you're told that you have to wait, it gives a lot of hopelessness. It's like, am I not poorly enough? So it's like giving them the message that they are important and that support is coming, and doing everything I can just to get them through to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And sort of on a similar line, I suppose, it's a question: how to support SEN children or those with communication issues or disabilities. Gavin, I was wondering if you might share any insight on this one in terms of any children that you might have come across in your work, and how you sort of bring out mental health awareness and things to look out for in terms of, you know, teaching staff and how they communicate to make sure that well-being is being met.
Yeah, firstly, working with SEND children is just absolutely fantastic, and the aim of our team is to actually go into primary schools, sit down with the head teacher, assess what needs are required, look at everything we can actually do you know, because ultimately we want to provide children with an expertise-led PE session, and you know, and that is for all children. But the most important thing is the open dialogue, is the communication. So when we do go into schools, we go in, we find out all the necessary information, and then we provide a PE strategy, you know, specifically for those children. And you know, for me, it's about having that PE specialist, that mentor, that person who's going to really not just give them a really good PE session, but really going to kind of interact and provide, you know, every child with a really fun session, because fun plays a massive part in it. From some of the SEND primary school events which we've put on in the past, you know, again, that's another added kind of opportunity for those children, because I'll be honest, we go into schools, and you know, they'll you know, the schools will say to me, Gavin, we would like this amount of primary school events this year. And we will say, right, okay, you know, what's the plan for the S&D children? So then, you know, it's our responsibility to actually give them options, and that's what we do. And but you know, for me, the most important thing is to listen and to provide a service. Just listening to everyone speaking this morning, I think communication plays a big part in everything we do, and there are some absolute massive challenges for us pre and post COVID, but we've got to listen, and then we've got to plan accordingly, and if we can do that, we can make some massive strides forward within our community. If we don't, we just float around and we just continue just to do the bare minimum. And you know, for me, you know, that's not why I set up Qualitas. It's to actually really make a difference for all children, that is.
Would you say at the moment that this might be an area of mental health particularly that is going sort of unnoticed throughout the pandemic? And I guess in the future, what do you see happening in terms of in terms of young people? Yeah,
so obviously the science says it all, doesn't it? You know, physical activity, you know, comes from release of endorphins. It lowers anxiety and reduces stress. That's the science behind it, you know, delivering PE and sports or activity. Now, you know, for us, especially over, if you look over the summer, PE just didn't happen really in primary schools, and obviously there was nothing for the children to do after they finished after school as well, and because of that, you then get contributing factors. So, for example, you know, we found that a lot of children were putting on a hell of a lot of weight. So then it was affecting, you know, their physical attributes, the coordination, the balance. All of these were then becoming contributing factors. Now, before COVID, if you look at the primary schools, on average, spend about 3% on physical activity out of their total budget, 3%. So for me, something has to be done. Something has to change. Yeah, we've now gone through COVID. You know, my company, we work with elite sports children in various different sports. So, and we were doing one-to-one training over the summer when we were allowed to do that. And over that period of time, over that 3-month period, we were getting children who put on over a stone in weight, and their coordination, their balance was totally kind of affected as well. And then that they start, children, when they've been doing this for a number of years, they start beating themselves up. You see father or mum at the top of the park watching the session, crying, being very upset because 3 months ago they saw a different child. All of this is massive, and I'm quite passionate about it, as you can probably hear. And we want to help. So we've got some big challenges ahead. Massive.
Absolutely. Someone's raised a really interesting question as well. How do we support the LGBTQ young people, which is often seen as a disproportionately affected sector? What kinds of issues do these people face, and how best do you think do they, in terms of their? I mean, Rebecca, have you sort of seen any impact in this sector as well, in the work that you do?
And I guess I think they've always been a vulnerable sector, before COVID, and it's like, every other young person that we're talking about is getting them the right support that they need, and they might need more, specialist input around that area just to kind of help normalise feelings. I know there is the Stonewall kind of organisation and project that does support particularly those young people, but I guess a lot of it is about just normalizing their feelings, give them reassurance that they will be okay, and that a lot of it is about their identity and supporting them to work out who they are, who they want to be, and supporting them to express their feelings rather than suppressing everything, pushing everything down, giving them a safe place to kind of talk about their worries and maybe what they're feeling confused about. But if you're concerned about that young person, again, CAMS can offer specialist support for that group of young people. But I would kind of recommend Stonewall to kind of give that support as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think we've had some other questions as well. In terms of what you as parents we should do or to look out for with people experiencing, young people that might not be clinically diagnosed with anything yet. As a parent, what kinds of things have you had to look out for? Sam, I'm not sure if this is something you might be able to answer in terms of any parents that you've discussed, met with at all.
Yeah, I mean, lots of our families' mental health is a factor, and sometimes that's the parents who have the mental health issue, and then that impacts on the young person as well. I'm sort of thinking about a couple of the families that we've been supporting recently where parents have had quite severe anxiety, and that's been sort of escalated during this period. And of course, with the children now returning back to school, that anxiety level has gone up again because they're worried about what's going to happen now, and with the changes, etc. So, we do have to support the families, the parents, as much as we do the children. And often we find in our situation that we make a difference by supporting the parent as well. So Friends of Family does have sort of counselling services available too. They are restricted at the moment again, and as Gavin said, it's a really difficult time. We've got to keep pushing forward. We've got to keep trying to get some of those services back on, because we know that this is going to be crucial moving forward, and it sort of feels as though things have been a little bit in limbo for the last sort of 6 months, and we've kind of been treading water, trying to just keep everybody kind of ticking along. And actually what we're finding is that those difficulties are becoming embedded, and we really need to support them and get those services back on, so that people can feel that they are part of something, that they are getting the support that they need. I'm not sure that answered the question. I'm sorry. Could you just remind me?
I mean, to be fair, that is perfect. I mean, in terms of also, how would you? I mean, it might be one for Rebecca to also answer, but as parents that might also suffer from mental health illnesses, how would you advise those people best to support their children who might also be displaying sort of symptoms? Sam, I don't know if that's something you want to turn to first.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real challenge, because if you're not well yourself, how do you then support your child that is also not well? And what we see is that a lot of the time the anxiety is projected onto the children, so they start fearing things that their parents fear. And it's incredibly challenging to make sure that parents feel confident in their own mental health. We would always be supporting our families and our parents to go to their GP, look for support from other organisations. We signpost a lot to sort of the wellbeing centres, etc. in our local area. But the GP really would be our first port of call for a parent who is struggling. And then obviously trying to find support for your children, as Rebecca was saying, keeping everybody well supported is the best way forward. But it is a challenge, and when people aren't well, they often shut down. They don't want to communicate, and as Gavin was saying, communication is the key. And so we try very hard to not be judgmental, not to sort of force people to do things that they don't want to, but encourage them. Go with them to the GP appointment. Offer time for them to offload and talk, and I often have parents who sort of chat to me on the phone, or I might meet them for a coffee, and they'll say, gosh, I feel so much better having talked about it. And the solution is there within them to the worries and concerns that they have, and actually sharing it is the best way that will help them to try and resolve it for themselves as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gavin, what would you say to parents that or parents or even school teachers, etc., how would they support children and young people at the moment, given the current unpredictability of COVID and where it's going? Oh, unless Rebecca, you want to.
Sorry, I'm here. Sorry, I'm back. No, I was on mute. I do apologise.
Oh, sorry.
It's fine. No, obviously, I'm looking at it from a physical activity perspective. With Qualitas delivering sport provisions in primary schools. I would definitely say for children, joining an exercise club within the community, linking it to their passion is really, really important. We in schools and we advise at home that children have like a mental health checking board. We don't call it the mental health, but we call it a checking board. So we've tried to find a way to how to communicate. So you might have a smiley face, or you might have, you might have, other magnets attached to it, which you can engage with. But I think the biggest one for me is, and we have it at my home, is like a digital switch off evening once a week. Just literally switch the TVs off, switch Facebook, Twitter, just literally switch everything off, and just engage with your children. We've got 3 children, me and my wife, and it's really important that we have that interaction. And if I could say to anybody, really, just try to do it once a week, because it can make a massive difference in your life. There is too much doom and gloom on the TV at the moment, isn't there? So we've got to change. People don't like to change, but we've got to change.
And Rebecca, what would you say needs to be done ultimately to aid the crisis in mental health illnesses in young people?
I mean, we've all touched upon it in terms of we clearly need more resources, but I think that's going to be more of a longer term thing. I think in the meantime, it's like, you know, letting young people know it's okay to not to be okay. It's okay to talk about their feelings. It's okay to let people know, you know, that they're struggling. And I think it's all working together, whether that's schools, families, parents, voluntary organisations, that we're all giving the same message and giving them, you know, time to kind of work through their feelings. And obviously we've spoken about those with kind of learning difficulties, maybe those that are on the autistic spectrum, and it's really thinking about the different means to support people, whereas some people can sit down and, you know, talk about how they're feeling. Other people, they might want to do drawing, they might want to do kind of play with water, play with sand. So it's really being kind of flexible about how we kind of support the young people. I know kind of Lego play is really popular at the moment with young people. It's about just giving them different forums to kind of work out, you know, what's going on for them. As has been said, you know, limiting, you know, social media, you know, having, you know, definitely, I know there's a lot of young people that take their phones to bed with them, and it's about, you know, switch your phone off when you're going to bed. Definitely don't look at social media before you go to bed, because, you know, if you're worrying before you go to sleep, you're not going to be able to go to sleep. And I think it's key things, isn't it, like sleep and eating, you know, they're just so important, that if we're not sleeping well and we're not eating well, they just affect everything else. So it's just supporting the young people. It's like going back to basics, really. You know, are they sleeping well? Are they eating well? Are they having their basic emotional needs met? And, you know, I think that's what we haven't mentioned, is that teachers have also been through this crisis. So it's like checking that the teachers are okay. If the teachers don't feel okay, how can they support the young people? A bit like if adults aren't okay, if parents aren't okay, they can't also support the young people. So it's really like this ripple effect. So we need to be supporting everyone, and, you know, looking after ourselves and letting young people work out how can they look after themselves. It's okay to be selfish sometimes, and it's just like giving that message and letting them understand, how can I relax, how can I switch my mind off.
It's a shame, I think Dick hasn't been able to join us due to technology difficulties, but I know in some of his work he does, obviously he speaks in a lot of schools and universities, and he addresses the fact that it is almost, it's that social stigma that is attached to mental health illness, and obviously it's really important that all these things happen, but it kind of sounds like there needs to be an upheaval of the, you know, the thought process around mental health. Does that echo with any of you? I'm not sure if it is.
Yeah. No, I think for me, schools, local communities, and also local business. I think if you can tie the three together and get them working together, I think, you know, I think you could achieve some really great things. I think, and Rebecca made a really good point about teachers at the moment. You know, they've got so much to deal with at this moment in time in playing catch up. So all the children are doing extra work to try and catch up for those 4 or 5 months lost. So everything else kind of goes out the window. So then you start putting more pressure on the children, and they're not participating in sport, they're not socially active at all, you know, whilst they're at school. So, you know, for me, I think we've just got to register everything and think, okay, let's just stop. Let's just think, right, what's really important at this moment in time. And for me, it's about, as you know, we mentioned earlier, that it's about trying to get back to the norm, and trying to give those children that consistency again. And before, we can't do that unless we actually change our approach a little bit. And you know, schools at this moment in time need all the support, because they're the hub for children, for each and everyone's development. So we've all got to work together. You know, local business, community, schools. Let's all work together. But let's make a difference. And you know, we offer PE mentors in primary schools. You know, that makes a massive difference. However, you know, if we're not kind of looking at sports psychology, mindfulness strategies, if we don't start looking at understanding, you know, the physiological pressures around the current now, then unfortunately, I don't think we're going to, you know, we're not going to move it forward. And until we actually really get together and start working together, you know, it's just going to unfortunately stay still.
We've just had a tip actually from one of our attendees, which is a brilliant idea actually. They've said we have a no technology we have a no technology front room. I think this has really helped as we go in there and talk, laugh and play and forget the outside world as we have no distractions. I think that's brilliant. I think that's I might have to take that one on board myself.
It's like, sorry, it's just like when you go into the gym at the moment in the morning, you know, turn the TVs off, turn them off, you know, put the music on and just, you know, enjoy your workout.
And we've just had another question as well. How can counsellors active in social media support young people struggling with anorexia? What content and links would be helpful? Obviously, I know we've talked about there's a lot of resources out there. Rebecca, I don't know if there's anything that you would be able to sort of recommend, obviously, in terms of the work that you do.
Yeah, so BEAT, B-E-A-T, is you know, a voluntary organisation that do a lot of work with eating disorders, which is an official organisation which I would recommend. I don't know if anyone's familiar with pro-ana material out there. So pro-ana, there's a lot of kind of dangerous material out there where they promote anorexia and promote weight loss tips. So it's really kind of trying to figure out what young people are kind of looking at online and making sure that it is healthy material, because sadly there's a lot of kind of dangerous things out there. So I guess I would recommend BEAT, and I guess a lot of it is providing them with the right information, so the right psychoeducation about what they should be eating, you know, the dangers of weight loss, and trying to, I guess, speak with the young people about, you know, what are they doing? What are they hoping to achieve? You know, are they happy? Just to get a bit more of understanding what they're doing, and then you can then provide them with the correct information rather than going online and looking at unhelpful things.
We haven't got much time left, so I just want to, Sam, if we could just turn to you like quickly, just in terms of any sort of top tips that you might be able to share with families that are experiencing sort of mental health difficulties, any sort of wrapping up sort of tips that you'd really sort of want to pass on to others.
Yeah, I think the key is staying connected to people. You know, if you can maintain some of those relationships that you've got and you've had in the past, try not to isolate yourself. You know, you're not alone. There are people out there who are willing to help and support you. So stay connected. I think, you know, what Gavin has said as well about trying to stay active, you know, trying to have a bit of purpose for your day, keeping your routine, whether it's the normal routine or not, but a routine that gets you up and gets you going in the morning really is important. And, you know, try and be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up. You know, I think Rebecca touched on this earlier. It's really important to look after yourself. You know, take some time out. If you're fortunate to be in a relationship where there are two parents, play a bit of team tag. You know, if you're having a bit of a rubbish day, take turns to be the one that's wobbling. You know, don't accept that, you know, it has to be always on you. You know, share the load a little bit. and hopefully, you know, look for those other support mechanisms. They are out there. It is hard sometimes to find them, and you do often have to shout loudly to get that support. But if you can, and you have the strength to do that, you know, they are there to support you.
That's brilliant. Gavin, if you could also just, obviously I haven't got very long left. I don't know if I'll be told off if I go over, but if you could just share like a few tips for any parents or teachers that you want to pass on. Oh.
Oh, I think for parents, there we go. I think for parents, for me, it's about connecting daily with your family and others within your community, and be sociable. I think that's really, really important. Obviously, being physical active it is, and reduces stress, produces the endorphins. For me, that's an important part of your life. In terms of the schools, I would look at introducing different interventions, so things like sports psychology, mindfulness, putting programs, introducing programs to primary schools, which have not done in the past. And we've been, I'll be honest, we've been doing this now for a number of years, and this was never kind of looked at or focused. It was never focused on before we got involved. But also, I think more than anything, I think in primary schools, they need like a PE mentor. They need somebody who's going to lift physical education and be that face and be that kind of PE support. I think a lot of my coaches, they do find that they don't see them as a teacher. They see them as a mentor. They see them as a person who's their confidant, and I think that's really, really important for children. They come and speak to them. They can speak to them about anything, and then obviously the open dialogue then between the head teachers and teachers becomes a lot easier. And also, last thing, PE specialists are really different. We have got PE teachers working for Qualitas. We've got sports coaches. We've got sports staff. We've got everything. However, we can't do the teacher's job, and the teachers can't do, if they're not a PE, they can't do our job. So work together, embrace everything, and you can achieve anything in life. You really can.
That's brilliant. Thank you all so much for being on this panel today. Your insight has been invaluable, and I'm sure to me and hopefully everyone else that's been watching. So we've got all of the contact details on the screen here. Hopefully it's showing up. And so if you want to approach any of us directly, that should be fine. We also have a feedback form for those of you that have attended. So if you could just take a few, I think it's just a couple of questions just to complete, that would be brilliant. And there should now be on the screen the list of our upcoming webinars this week. And actually next Monday as well. So there's a lot on. So tomorrow we've got race, faith and mental health in the workplace, as well as discussing PTSD and mental health in the military community. So feel free, they're all free. You can sign up for all of them, or any of them that you wish. So yeah, I really encourage it, obviously, in terms of raising awareness and knowledge for Mental Health Day this year. And I hope you're all well and stay healthy. And thank you very much for attending.
No.
All right.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All the best. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.